Okay, welcome to your headlining act for the Glastonbury for Accountants. Thank you so much for being here with us. My name's Sophie. I'm from Firmcheck, which is an AML compliance software, and I promise you that will not be the first time I plug Firmcheck. They pay my bills. I'm under obligation. But I'm the event and community manager. So that means essentially my role is party planner and friend maker. And we have David with us as well.
Good morning. My name's David Winch. I'm from MLRO Support. And what we do is kind of what it says on the tin. We support MLROs in accountancy firms and talk about AML, which is why you're here today. So,
and what a way to start your morning talking about AML at 9:15. Like, you're really starting strong today, so we'll only get better from here, we promise. In working with David, what David does really well is he tells AML compliance through stories rather than going, thou shalt collect client IDs. He talks about it around stories, and it really brings it to life and brings it to reality, essentially. So that's what we'll be focusing on today. So what we hope that you'll walk away from this session, we will share compliance disasters and just a wee bit of a insight. We have asked permission to share these stories, so we're not airing anybody's dirty laundry here. But we hope that you'll either feel better about your own compliance because you won't resonate with anything that we'll say, and you'll walk away and you'll be like, I'm choice. Or you'll feel like you're not the only one. Compliance is often hidden in the dark, or people are often afraid to talk about it. So that's what we hope to achieve here, is that something will resonate for you, and then we'll also share how to climb out of that compliance disaster too.
Yeah, I've actually got a mug which says on it, relax, I've seen worse. And that's kind of the message. You may be a bit anxious about your AML compliance, and our object here is not to increase your anxiety but to reduce it.
Yeah, totally. David and I host a monthly webinar as well, so we have heard every question under the sun. There is no stupid, silly questions at all. So we will have a 10-minute Q&A at the end, so lock those questions in for then. Should we move into our first story?
Go for it.
All of these stories are from a Firmcheck perspective. So if you hear me say Firmcheck and you don't want to hear it, just ignore that part. But often I work in education, so people often come to me and tell me stories, and they're like, what do I do? And then honestly, 9 times out of 10, I'm like, talk to David, please. I used to be a makeup artist. I'm not really that qualified, but I'm lucky to have really intelligent people with lots of experience. But this story... this MLRO at this accounting firm was stressed, which is a surprise. That never happens. But they had entrusted their AML compliance to someone in operations. So this operations person was responsible for onboarding new clients when it came to their AML as well, but also maintaining ongoing compliance. So one of the first things here might be ongoing compliance. What do you mean? You do need to renew your compliance annually, just by the way. So this operations person was responsible for that as well. This director had communicated really well, had documents and processes in place for this operations person to maintain compliance, and this operations person as well was asking all of the right questions. How do I do this? When do I do the ID? All of that. So there was no disaster to be seen at this point. Everyone thought it was all copacetic and working. And then it came to a point where some other factors came into play, and this operations person left the business. So now the director was going through the handover from that person, and oh no, it was uncovered that AML compliance hadn't been done properly. IDs hadn't been collected, and some of them were 5 years old or more. Client risk assessments weren't done. It was not compliant at a 0. And this poor director goes, great, now I've got a mountain of work to get my compliance up to date. From this, David, what do you see some of the initial things that might have gone wrong in this situation?
This is kind of a people problem, in that I can remember years ago actually reading a book that said, don't do, delegate. And of course, this is what the guy did. He delegated. But the thing about delegating is you don't just say to somebody, there it is, and you walk away and you leave it. You actually have to keep in touch, and it's an ongoing process, and that wasn't working in this situation. At the end of the day, what we're aiming for, as you probably know, the supervisory bodies do reviews, and they have a 3-scale outcome. You're either compliant, which is like wonderful, or generally compliant, or not compliant. And I personally feel that if you get a generally compliant, that'll do. Probably Sophie will tell you that's not the right attitude. But I'm like, yeah, I passed. Thank goodness, it's over. But in this case, when you went into the depths of things, it was not compliance. So what you have to do is, fairly obviously, you have to go through, look at the CDD, look at the IDs, look at the risk assessments, and in this case, redo them.
Yeah.
And look also at your firm-wide risk assessment, your overall document, your policies, controls and procedures document. And that, actually, they were probably okay, but it was when you got down the level below to the detail that it wasn't working. Is that fair?
Yeah, no, totally. For me, definitely experiencing this situation, it certainly felt like this operations person maybe didn't fully understand AML compliance. Often people go, you just collect a driver's license and then I'm done. And that's not it at all. So I truly feel like sometimes these situations come about from a lack of education or a lack of understanding. And God, AML compliance is boring. So why am I gonna sit and do a course? But I've made courses, so I hope you find them fun. But I think it was this person thought that maybe they were doing right, but maybe they didn't quite fully understand. And there wasn't that because this operations person was so trusted, there wasn't that oversight from that director being like, I need to check your work. It was like, you're asking the right questions. We seem to be going okay.
Yep.
So what happened? So this has a happy ending. Every disaster that we're sharing today has a happy ending. So this director came to me, said, oh no, please help me. And so we sat down and showed them how to use the Firmcheck software. Just plug again. But if you weren't to use the Firmcheck software, it would be about, okay, understanding the problem and what we're going to do to not have the same problem again. So in this instance, we put in a process in place of how compliance was going to be managed in the future, but also kind of noted what went wrong, which was lack of oversight or annual review process of the firm's compliance and needing to engage in more AML education.
So that was a people problem, really, wasn't it?
Totally. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think maybe a lack of confidence as well. Like when you really do talk about AML and you're like, legislation 25, it's good. You're accountants, you're not lawyers. Right? So if you kind of, yet again, bring in the human element of it and maybe not talk about legislation so much, that's just my opinion. Would there be anything else? And this director is happy now and they're looking after their AML compliance fab, and I went in and had a look and I was like, I'm so proud of you. So it is really good now. Is there anything else you would recommend as a
should we
remedy?
crack on to the next one?
Should we? Okay, easy. Okay, process. This firm got a notice that they were going to be audited. So I feel like that's maybe all of your nighttime fears of when someone's going to come around knocking and be like, it's me. And this firm unfortunately had that happen. Just to note, I can see you taking pictures. I'll give you the QR code for the slides at the end, just by the way. But you're welcome to take pictures too. I look great today, so does David.
You're in Firmcheck yellow. You're absolutely dazzling, Sophie.
Thank you. It's intentional, I promise. So this firm, got a 3-month notice that they were going to be audited. So they had the oh no, and then they called Firmcheck. But just to note as well, you can call your accounting body. ACCA has an anonymous hotline that is anonymous. I promise. I asked the people, I asked the questions, and you can ask any question there and it doesn't go any further than the person that you're talking to. I can't speak to other accounting bodies or supervisory bodies, but that's just a resource. So you can call someone else other than me. But had a 3-month notice. So had the oh no, called Firmcheck, what do we do? And we started reviewing their process and found, again, things had been neglected over a period of time. So while I think compliance is an annual thing or an onboarding thing, time moves quite fast and you tend to forget to have that process in place. So this was years long of non-compliance. And they knew they wouldn't pass the AML audit, but they really wanted to. Basically, who doesn't want to pass? So they were asking for how do we get everything up to speed really quickly. David, when you've seen a firm that's kind of been non-compliant over a longer period of time, what do you often think is the symptoms of that, should we say?
The symptoms, yeah. I often actually get calls from people who've had the visit and it's been, I shouldn't say a disaster, but I'm going to say it's been a disaster. And they're like, I've been given 30 days to fix this. In this particular case, you had a bit more time. And start with the overarching documents, the policies, controls and procedures document, the firm-wide risk assessment document. Look to see if people have done the training that they're supposed to do. And then get into the detail of the individual client risk assessments and so on, the client due diligence. But here, yes, they hadn't kind of set up the process properly to do it. Unlike the first one we mentioned where they had the process, but it just wasn't working. Now they hadn't even really thought about the process. I was talking to an accountant just yesterday and he said, yeah, we formed a company for this client, but we're going to do the CDD and the risk assessment in 12 months' time. So they hadn't done any ID verification. Now, hopefully, all of you know that when you start acting for a client, the regulations require that you do the CDD, the ID, straight away. And he failed to do that and failed to recognise that just forming the company, he was thinking, this is just a bit of paperwork we're doing to get the show on the road. We'll get down to the proper work when we do the first annual accounts. And that's not the way the money laundering regs approach things, unfortunately. You have to do it pretty much at day one. Mm-hmm. So, having said that, I've completely lost the thread of where I was, Sophie.
But you see what I mean about the stories, right? It kind of makes it more resonating. I'm sure some of you will be like, actually, yeah, like I've just started my firm. Why? We got a question actually in our webinar the other day of, I'm a sole person, I'm a sole practitioner. Why am I needing to write an education policy? It's just me. But it brings life to that it actually doesn't matter what size that you are, you still have to wear the different t-shirts of AML compliance, if that makes sense. I come from a project management background as well as makeup artistry. And if you walk away today and this resonates with you, you don't think that you have that process in place, I'll just run through maybe a quick project plan of what I would do or what I would advise you to do to kind of review that. Your first would be reviewing each individual client. So pulling that up and looking at, do I have a ID document, so driver's license or passport? Do I have a utilities bill? When were these documents collected? Are they still likely to be correct?
Can I just pitch in there and say, please, electronic check?
Yes.
As another option.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of electronic checks in terms of ID. Partly because it includes coverage of things like sanctions, it includes coverage of things like PEPs, and if you don't have an electronic check, then your supervisor might say to you, right, how do you know you don't have any clients who are PEPs? How do you know you don't have any clients who are subject to sanctions? Mm-hmm. And the answer usually is, well, I've known these clients for 20 years. You know, they're not going to be PEPs. But in terms of documentation, you haven't got anything. Mm-hmm. And you need to get that sorted. Now, an electronic check is like a quick and easy and cheap way of covering that off. But sorry to interrupt.
No, please. And just to clarify, an electronic check, if we were to do that in an AML software, not Firmcheck specific, what that does is just verifies that documentation, that looks to be authentic. Because there's all this hype around deep fakes and things like that, and don't worry about it, at least not for this year. And it just verifies that, but also, runs that PEP and sanctions check. Is everyone here comfortable with PEP and sanctions? Okay, cool. If not, come talk to us, totally. So client identity, client risk assessment. So that's that annoying checklist where you go, this person doesn't have crypto, this person lives in the UK, whatever have you, that you go through. What else would you say? Your firm-wide risk assessment after that?
Yeah, I tend to start with the firm-wide risk assessment, but we can fall out later, Sophie. It's fine.
We can disagree.
Yeah,
It's fine. Yeah. Well, AML compliance is like cooking dinner. So you're cooking the potatoes, you're doing your client risk assessment, you've got the chicken in the oven, which is your client ID. You have to kind of all do it at once, which breaks my brain because everything has to be in order and a process. But you kind of have to do everything all at once. But those would be the things that I would evaluate to see where you stand. There are Firmcheck questionnaires that you can do that kind of can give you an insight of where you might be on that scale as well. So
Sophie, how did you sort this particular disaster?
thanks, David. So this person started using Firmcheck and then everything was okay. It was what happened. But this person was actually our first client that we have that actually passed an AML audit. So internally at Firmcheck, we were like, this is awesome. Yay, we can finally say that using Firmcheck can make you compliant. But this person did what we had just said. Because they were under a time crunch, reviewing that client identification information first was what was key, because often, you know your clients, they don't value AML compliance as much as you do. So they're not going to return their driver's license in the time that you would like them to. So that just gives you a bit more of a breathing space if you have to follow them up 4 times, should we say, because that's probably what's likely. All their documentation was the equivalent of everywhere in the tech world. So they put it all onto a centralized system. And that made everything really easy to access for them to know what they were missing.
Yeah, I think I would say about AML software is, don't tell Sophie this, okay, but you don't have to use AML software.
No, I'm not going to kick you off the stage. That's totally
but
fine.
having said that, it makes it a lot easier and a lot more systematic. And if you're like me, scatterbrained and keep meaning to do things and putting things on to-do lists and then not doing them, then using software does discipline you to get the stuff right. It will highlight for you where things are missing that should be there, and you can sort it out before you get the email saying we're on our way to do a supervisor's visit. Yeah,
feels like the supervisor's like a mother-in-law or something, eh? You're like, oh, you're coming to visit, okay, I'll make a dinner. No, totally, and David is right. You don't need an AML compliance software. Crazy. I've seen some really juiced up Excel spreadsheets that rival a lot of software options in this room. But David is correct. Software puts you in kind of like a guardrail and really makes it clear what you're missing and what not. I would say if you've got under 10 or 15 clients, you don't need a compliance software because that's enough for you to manage on your own. I would say I would feel comfortable with that. Fantastic. Yeah, and the happy ending was that they passed, so that was great. Technology.
Go on, Sophie.
Okay. So this firm was locked into pricey software. So I'm sure that resonates again with everybody in this room. You're like, software prices. And even though I work in software, I'm like, it's imaginary. Like I can't touch it. So why am I paying so much for something I can't touch? But this firm was locked in for what they thought was an AML compliance software, and I'm talking tens of thousands of pounds annually and long-term contracts as well. Yeah, I can see some go, ooh. So they overly trusted this software, to be honest with you. They thought implementing it would mean that they're compliant and then they're done, don't need to do anything else. I'll just do what the software says, that's it, which is not correct with any software, whether or not that's AML software or not, right?
Yeah, so people do say to us, what I want to do is I want to buy a solution. I want to give you some money and that's the AML done. And I'm sorry, that doesn't happen. You actually have to engage with your AML compliance. There isn't any software that you just press the button and think, that's it.
Even with AI, everybody's like, surely with AI can just look after my AML compliance. No, I would stand here today and say AI will never completely look after your AML compliance. It will always have that human touch in it for you to like physically meet your clients. What a crazy concept. And also manually review that documentation as well. But we often get that question at Firmcheck, and I'll be like, it's yellow, it's a beautiful AML compliance software, and they're like, okay, so I'll give you money and then you do it. And I'm like, oh, no, sorry. But I can help. But yeah, as I said, they were misinformed about what the technology actually did and what it actually looked like when it came to AML compliance. And they were oversold, and they just trusted the software person or company, wasn't an individual. What are some of the things that you think have led to this, David? So they've overly trusted a software, oversold.
Yeah, I think it is. If you go to a salesperson and say, I want this, will it do it? They'll also always say yes, won't they? You know, that's what they do. That's the job. Sorry.
Yeah. No.
But actually, risk assessment, for example, is a judgment. And ultimately, it's a judgment that you make about risk. It's not a computation. It is a judgment. It's an assessment. Mm-hmm. And no software is going to give you the complete answer to that. It can help you, but it won't give you the answer. And if you expect it to, then it will mislead you.
Probably some software evaluation tips while we're in a venue with lots of software options. When I look to review software, I need to decide whether or not I even like the people that work at the software, to be really honest with you, because software is meant to be a sidecar or a teammate to your firm, and you're giving this person money, so equivalent of an employee, and you're going to have a really difficult relationship if you don't like the salesperson, because you definitely won't like the CS people if you don't like the salesperson, because you want to feel comfortable, you want to feel supported. So that's all really important. So that's important to me.
So I'm guessing, Sophie, the solution is they buy more software.
No, no, not at all. But I think it's important. That's something to consider. And the other thing too, this firm was locked into a 3-year contract. So they were paying tens of thousands of pounds for a 3-year contract that they knew wasn't working, but they still had to pay it. Another software tip, and I'm shooting myself in the foot with Firmcheck, only buy software month by month when you're trying it out for the first time. It's the equivalent of a first date. I'm sure you and Janice didn't go on one date and then get married for how long? 30 years it's been?
It's nearly 50 years, but yeah.
Tens of thousands of pounds.
It was one date, yeah, actually.
Oh, was it? Oh.
I'll tell you later.
Okay. Well, in my life, I have to go on multiple dates, but I'm uncomfortable. But you go on a date, you go on a month, you try it out, see if it works, and then if you don't like it, gap it. But if you do like it, then commit to that longer term, and then maybe they'll give you a 10% discount. I know certainly Firmcheck does, but we would probably prefer that, me being a software person. So commit only month to month if you can. And if they don't offer month to month, something's not right with them, not with you. They'll love you. Okay, what did they do? So this firm actually engaged with Firmcheck Education, that we were putting out the webinars, the courses, things like that. And they went, oh, something's amiss. Because this software was only doing client IDs, it wasn't doing client risk assessment, it wasn't giving annual reviews, any of that. So they started to realise something was amiss. They had really formal meetings with, it was a very large firm, had formal meetings about who was actually responsible for AML compliance too, and they reviewed the areas that their previous software had missed. So it was being that client risk assessment and that annual review process. And then they managed to cancel their contract and then move to a much more friendly option. Do you have any technology compliance disaster stories or anything that's kind of happened like this with clients that you've dealt with, David?
I'm going to tell tales out of school now here. I was doing some work with a firm that was supervised by ACCA. And the ACCA supervisor came along and said, you're using software and it's not performing for you. And the software they were using was the ACCA's own software, the ACCA's own Excel type risk assessment thing. And the criticism that was made was that you, the accountant, don't understand the software that you're using, and you don't understand how it works. And so it was giving them risk assessments, high, medium or normal, low, and they didn't understand where those were coming from. And so they got wellied by the supervisor. I thought that was most unfair. But if you are using software, you do actually need to understand what the tool is that you are using, how it works, and still I would say you need to ultimately make your own judgment about the risk assessment and make your and be able to justify why you have assessed the risk of this particular client as being high or normal or low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And it comes the same when outsourcing AML compliance too. That's a wee bit of a hype conversation, I suppose. Maybe I'm fueling that as well because I just hosted a webinar on outsourcing AML compliance. But when it comes to that as well, you still need to be responsible for the AML compliance. You're not ever going to outsource anything completely. I think there was a really good phrase that the guest said, which was you can outsource the work, but you can't outsource the responsibility.
Absolutely.
And it's the same when it comes to technology. You can't outsource responsibility. If your professional body comes knocking and you're like, oh, but this software said it does everything, they'll be like, sod off, it doesn't, and you're in trouble now. So, right? Does this feel like that concludes technology, really?
That concludes technology. So all of those three examples really are leading us to a generally compliant or compliant solution. And we're looking at different ways in which people have struggled to get there.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And as well, I think my second half of this year, the kind of message I have is that your accounting body is there to help. And I know that feels really weird to say, but it is the truth. Where I often hear people being like, I'm really scared of my accounting body. I don't want to ask them for help. All of these things, they are actually there to help. And Firmcheck has started conversations with these accounting bodies to try and like break that mold. And we recently had a webinar with IAB, ICB and ACCA compliance, heads of compliance, and they all said the same, that they want you to reach out and help, because I think the thing that's often missing is that if you're not compliant, it reflects badly on them, and then they get in trouble. Is it with the FCA or OPBAS?
Well, OPBAS.
OPBAS.
Yes. Yeah.
So there's someone auditing the auditor, and so they don't want to get in trouble. So they do want to help. I just really want to drive that home. Okay.
Can I just ask, who actually loves and adores AML compliance? Hey, two. Okay.
I'm paid to.
Who actually hates AML compliance, thinks it's a complete waste of time, thinks that we shouldn't really have to do it, and if it weren't for the fact that somebody's on our back, we wouldn't be doing that stuff. Anybody feel that?
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, fine. We kind of get that vibe, don't we?
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
But even it's actually Firmcheck's first birthday in the UK. So exactly a year ago, I said to a man, I was like, I really want to make compliance fun. And he was like, silly girl. But I hope that we start to change that and that it makes it more comfortable. Do you want to talk a little bit of the main key areas of compliance? I've just got a little thing on the side for you to see, though.
Yes.
Is it just
yes,
okay?
I've got a copy in front of me, so I don't have to turn around all the time.
No, we just got a 10-minute warning.
Oh, right.
We've been yapping too much.
We've been yapping too much. Okay. Right, fine. So we call this the honeycomb because of the design, but it kind of features some of the key areas of AML compliance. And Sophie and I were disagreeing before about where we started with this. I actually like to start with the firm-wide risk assessment, which is one of a hierarchy of risk assessments. And if I've got a minute to say, the way that it works basically is that the UK government does a risk assessment, a money laundering risk assessment of the money laundering risk in the UK economy. And that's like the top tier. And then below that, the accountancy bodies, the professional bodies, do a risk assessment of the money laundering risk that affects the accountancy sector. And the idea is that accountancy sector money laundering risk feeds off some of the ideas in the UK government national risk assessment. And then the next tier below that is that your firm creates a firm-wide risk assessment, which is the money laundering risk that your firm faces. And that is this document, and it talks about the type of clients you have, the sectors they're in, the type of services you provide, something about your firm in terms of location and staff and size, the technology that you use, the way that you actually communicate with clients and the way that they communicate with you. Do you see them face to face? Do you just email? That sort of thing. And then below that, the fourth tier is the money laundering risk assessment relating to an individual client. So those are the four tiers. The firm-wide risk assessment I rather like because it stands back and it looks at your firm and thinks, right, what are the money laundering risks that we face because of our client base, because of where we are, because of what we do.
And the firm-wide risk assessment as well, I've got a memory like a sieve, but there was some report somewhere, you're probably going to remember, that said that the firm-wide risk assessment or risk assessments in general is one of the most areas of non-compliance. So it's the most, if today and you're like, I'm probably not compliant, look at this first, look at your firm-wide risk assessment first, because this is probably where that non-compliance is living. Yeah.
And of course, the firm-wide risk assessment has to be particular to your firm because your firm is unique, your firm is special and different, and so your firm-wide risk assessment is going to be different from anybody else's firm-wide risk assessment. It's not something that you can just pull off the template off your professional body website and change the name.
Yeah, totally.
And then alongside that, you have your firm's policies, controls and procedures document. And again, tells you what it does. It's about the policies, controls and procedures. Again, the key thing is you've got to tailor that so that it's about what your firm's policies are, not what ICAEW or ACCA or ICB or whatever produces a template. Because one of the things, if you get a supervisor's visit, one of the things that they will do is look at whether you are actually in practice following the policies, controls and procedures that you've written in this document. Mm-hmm. And of course, if you are not, you have shot yourself in the foot because you have given them a stick to beat you with, saying your own document says you do electronic checks, for example, and actually you're not doing them.
Yeah.
So, policies, controls and procedures.
I'm just going to move and shake us along so that we have enough time for Q&A at the end.
Okay.
So other than that, it's everything else.
Yeah.
Is how we'll conclude that. But it is kind of the standard staff training, annual IDs verified for all of the persons with significant control, maintaining and monitoring your compliance program, making sure it is working, and then the individual client risk assessments. If you have any specific questions, ask them in our Q&A, eh?
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So that leaves us to the end. So as I said, it's Firmcheck's first birthday in the UK. We actually came from New Zealand, so we have 10 years before that happened. You are all personally invited to the birthday party that will be happening from 11 over in our stand over by Theatre 2. You know what's going on. You would say they should come along, right?
Absolutely.
And we also have a Firmcheck person. His name is Al at the back, who has little flyers if I've convinced you to try Firmcheck at all. David, MLRO Support?
Yes. Well, as I mentioned, what we do is we support accountancy firms in their AML compliance, both after they've had a visit and when the result has been poor, and before. Obviously, it's a bit easier before to put things in place. one of the things that on the previous slide was the annual review of compliance. And believe it or not, your accountancy body, your professional body, expects you to review your own AML compliance, to, if you like, do your own audit of your firm's AML compliance, preferably annually, and to keep a record of that. And it's something that's actually in the money laundering regulations, but it's not something that a lot of people are aware of. And again, you can get checklists and things, or you can get somebody external to do it, and that's another option.
No,
Sorry.
that's fantastic. No, that's perfect. That takes us to the end. So you can scan the QR code if you'd like to snag the slides. Does anyone have any questions for us? There's no too simple questions, no overly complicated ones.
Yes, there are no stupid questions.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, go on. Well, sorry, we'll get you a mic.
So I was just wondering if you had any top tips for things you could do if you were aware that you were going to get a visit from a male supervisor.
The short answer to that question is yes. Okay. No, maybe we'll say a bit more. What I would suggest you do, actually, as a sort of fun exercise, is to imagine that you are instructed to do a supervisor's visit to your firm. Okay, so what are you going to do to prepare for that visit? Well, the first thing you're going to do is going to look at the information that the supervisory body has got on the firm. Hopefully that is up to date. Hopefully that is correct. You're going to look at if there's been any previous visits, and if there have, what were the criticisms made in those previous visits. The first title that we came up with for this session was Epic Failures of AML Compliance. And then we decided that wouldn't be an attractive thing. But the worst failures of AML compliance that I've seen in terms of supervisors' reviews have been where the supervisor's done a review a few years ago, raised some issues, and the firm has said, yeah, we'll sort that. And then they come back a few years later and find the same issues again. Mm-hmm. And they go ballistic. You can imagine. I have seen firms actually thrown out of their professional bodies, basically for that.
Yeah.
For failing to sort when they've said they're going to sort it. Because the professional body think, well, you lied to us. And that's not appropriate. That's not acceptable for a member of our professional body. There's the door. You're out. And you might be thinking, right, what you can do is you can go and register with HMRC. And HMRC, first thing they do is they check with your previous professional body, and HMRC can and do refuse to register you in those circumstances. And they then say, you have 30 days to close your business. So, that is the epic fail.
I'm smiling because you're on a war with HMRC when it comes to registering them for AML. But I've done a talk before on like how to create a project management plan to bring about your AML compliance. So if you want to email me, please don't send me any weird emails. It's just sophie@firmcheck.com, and I'll send you that as well so you can help get that. But my personal ones, check your client IDs first and see what you're missing and then build it back from there.
Yeah.
Miss Alex, you had a question? Oh, 2 cents.
Thank you so much, guys. So I was the person that I had my employee do the compliance with. So I said to David, I'm happy to share that story. And I didn't recognise all the stuff that was missing, but I did it before on the Google Sheet, but then I actually moved everything over to Firmcheck software. And actually, it was much more easy than I thought. And I gave it to somebody else and I thought, why is it so complicated? Why is it taking so long? But once I actually stepped in myself and did it, it was actually really, really easy. And when people did the bio verify side, again, checking their the facial recognition and things like that, I didn't realise that in the background, actually you get to see the pictures and all of the information behind the scenes. And when I was saying that, it's quite funny because I didn't actually realise, like some people probably didn't realise that I got to see that, and then like, you must have just come out of the shower.
No, there's some funny pictures.
That's kind of what made it fun. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm kind of glad I got to do this part, but it was actually really easy. Now I can check and manage and make sure like everything is in order genuinely for all of my clients. So that was kind of my story. It was like a mess before, and now it's not. So.
Oh, thanks for holding your hand up, Alex. I told you didn't need to, but I think people like Alex kind of putting your hand up and being like, I've had this situation, really does help everybody come about and feel more comfortable and welcome. And Alex is most likely open to being asked questions. I was going to say we actually have a client of Firmcheck who reviews people's houses on Google Maps to see whether or not their house is related to how much money they earn. So if they earn £40,000 a year and they're living in a mansion, something ain't right. So you can kind of make it fun. Was there any other questions before we conclude?
I've got a question for you. Who actually Googles themselves? Right, very few. It sounds terribly vain, but please Google yourself. Because if your supervisor's going to do a visit, that's one of the things they're going to do as well, is Google you. And you want to know what's out there.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. And we'll be around all day, won't we?
Yes, yeah, you're welcome to come and ask us questions. Thank you for sitting here while I live my fantasy of wearing a Britney Spears mic. And the Firmcheck stands over in the corner. As I said, be there by 11, but you're welcome to ask us any questions. You have my email address now. No weird things, please. And thank you for your time this morning and have a good day.
Thank you.